The Europa Anomalies, a space horror novella. Chapter 1: The Descent. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her gloved hand against the observation window of the descent capsule, watching Jupiter's great red spot rotate slowly beneath them. After 18 months in the sterile confines of the research vessel Odyssey, the massive storm seemed almost alive, a living eye staring back at her through the void. Atmospheric entry in T-minus 60 seconds. Commander Chen's voice crackled through the comm system, steady as always. Elena could see him in the pilot's seat ahead, his broad shoulders tense beneath his flight suit. Marcus Chen had been NASA's golden boy for 15 years, but she noticed the subtle tremor in his hands during the final briefing, the way his jaw clenched when they reviewed the anomalous readings from Europa. "All systems nominal," reported Dr. James Wright from the engineering station, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. James was the youngest member of their crew at 29, a prodigy in quantum mechanics who'd published 3 groundbreaking papers on exotic matter before his 25th birthday. Elena had caught him sketching equations on napkins during meals, his mind constantly working, constantly calculating. "I'm reading elevated radiation levels from the moon's surface," said Dr. Sarah Kim, their xenobiologist. Her voice carried that familiar note of scientific excitement tinged with apprehension. Sarah had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, the possibility of discovering life beyond Earth. Elena wondered if she was prepared for what they might actually find. The descent capsule shuddered as they entered Europa's thin atmosphere. Ice particles scraped against the hull like skeletal fingers, and Elena felt her stomach lurch as they dropped through the frozen sky. Below them, the surface of Europa stretched out in endless patterns of ice and shadow, a crystalline wasteland scarred by massive fractures that glowed with an otherworldly blue light. There, Chen pointed to a massive fissure that cut across the landscape like a surgical incision. That's where the signal originated. Elena nodded, her throat dry. 6 months ago, the Odyssey had detected an anomalous energy signature emanating from Europa, something that defied their understanding of physics. The readings suggested a concentrated source of exotic matter, possibly dark energy, buried deep within the moon's subsurface ocean. What should have been a routine survey mission had become something far more significant. And far more dangerous. The capsule touched down with a gentle thud on the ice shelf adjacent to the fissure. Through the windows, Europa's landscape stretched out in surreal beauty, crystalline formations that caught and reflected Jupiter's dim light, creating prismatic rainbows in the vacuum. It was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. "Surface pressure is negligible," Wright reported. "Temperature is minus 160 Celsius. The ice beneath us is stable, but I'm reading some unusual thermal signatures in the fissure itself." "Define unusual," Chen said, already unstrapping himself from the pilot's seat. "Hot spots, localized areas where the temperature jumps by several hundred degrees, then drops back down. It's like something is generating heat in pulses." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. Could it be volcanic activity? "No known geological process produces these patterns," Wright said. "The energy signatures are too regular, too precise. They're almost engineered." The word hung in the air like a curse. Engineered. Elena had spent her career studying the cosmos, searching for evidence that humanity was not alone. Now, standing on the threshold of that discovery, she felt a profound sense of dread. Some doors once opened could never be closed again. "Suit up," Chen ordered. "We have 12 hours of daylight before Jupiter's rotation takes us into night. I want to be back on the Odyssey long before then." As they donned their EVA suits, Elena caught Sarah's eye. The xenobiologist was smiling, but it was a nervous expression that didn't reach her eyes. "This is it," Sarah whispered through their private comm channel. "First contact, after all these years." "We don't know what we're dealing with yet," Elena cautioned. "Stay focused on the mission parameters. We document, we analyze, we don't take unnecessary risks." "Since when is first contact not a risk?" Elena had no answer for that. The airlock cycled with a mechanical hiss, and then they were standing on the surface of Europa. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, about an eighth of what they were used to, and each step sent up small clouds of ice crystals that hung in the vacuum like glittering diamonds. Elena activated her suit's recording systems, documenting everything. The ice beneath their feet was perfectly transparent in places, and she could see down into the depths, layers upon layers of frozen water that had been accumulating for billions of years. Somewhere far below, beneath kilometers of ice, lay Europa's hidden ocean. The thought of all that water, all that darkness, made her shiver. Energy readings are spiking, Wright announced, consulting his handheld scanner. Whatever's down there, it's definitely active. They approached the edge of the fissure carefully. It was wider than it had appeared from above, at least 50 meters across, and so deep that Alina's helmet lamp couldn't penetrate the darkness below. The walls of the crevasse were smooth, almost glass-like, as if they'd been melted and refrozen countless times. Look at this, Sarah crouched near the edge, pointing to strange formations in the ice. These patterns, they're not natural. Alina knelt beside her, studying the geometric shapes carved into the frozen surface. They were too precise to be natural phenomena, hexagonal arrays that seemed to pulse faintly with their own light. As she watched, the glow intensified, and she heard a strange sound through her suit's audio pickups. It was a humming, almost musical in nature, but with an underlying discord that made her teeth ache. "Do you hear that?" she asked. "Hear what?" Chen was scanning the fissure with his rifle-mounted flashlight, its powerful beam cutting through the darkness. That humming like a tuning fork, but wrong somehow. The others looked at her with concern. "Alina, I'm not picking up any audio signals," Wright said gently. "Are you feeling okay?" She started to respond when the humming stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the sound had been. Alina stood slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "We need to be careful here," she said. "Something's not right." "Agreed," Chen said. "Right, can you get us a stable descent route? I want to see what's generating those energy readings." Wright deployed a series of anchor points along the fissure's edge, his movements precise and practiced. Within minutes, they had a secure climbing system rigged and were beginning their descent into Europa's frozen depths. The walls of the crevasse closed around them like the jaws of some massive beast. As they descended, Alina noticed that the ice was changing, becoming less transparent and more opaque, with strange discolorations that seemed almost organic in nature. The temperature readings on her HUD showed fluctuations that made no sense, pockets of warmth in the otherwise frozen environment. "I'm reading biological signatures," Sarah announced, her voice tight with excitement. "Complex organic compounds. This could be life, Marcus." "Stay focused," Chen replied, but Alina could hear the tension in his voice. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." They continued their descent for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes. The fissure narrowed as they went deeper, until they were rappelling down a shaft barely wider than Alina's shoulders. The strange humming returned, louder now, and this time the others heard it too. "Audio sensors are picking up subsonic frequencies," Wright reported. "Whatever's making that sound, it's powerful." "And getting closer," Alina added. They emerged into a vast cavern that shouldn't have existed. The space was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium, and filled with structures that defied easy description. Crystalline formations rose from the floor like frozen trees, their surfaces covered in the same hexagonal patterns Alina had noticed on the surface. But these were larger, more complex, and they pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. In the center of the cavern lay what could only be described as a lake, a pool of liquid water that steamed in the frigid air, defying every law of thermodynamics Alina knew. And rising from the center of that impossible lake was something that made her question everything she thought she understood about the universe. It was a structure, but it was also alive. Not alive in any biological sense that Alina could comprehend, but alive in the way a star is alive, vast, powerful, and utterly alien. It shifted and flowed like liquid metal, its surface rippling with patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. The humming emanated from it, filling the cavern with a sound that seemed to resonate in Alina's bones. "My God," Sarah breathed, "it's beautiful." "It's not natural," Chen said, raising his rifle. "Whatever this thing is, it doesn't belong here." "Marcus, wait," Alina started to say, but the words died in her throat as the structure began to change. The humming intensified, and the surface of the alien construct began to ripple more rapidly. Patterns of light flowed across its surface like liquid fire, and Alina felt a pressure building in her head. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was overwhelming, a sensation of something vast and incomprehensible trying to communicate. "I'm reading massive energy spikes," Wright shouted over the rising hum. "Whatever this thing is, it's powering up." "We need to fall back," Chen ordered. "Now." But it was already too late. The structure pulsed with blinding light, and Alina felt something fundamental shift in the air around them. The temperature in the cavern began to rise rapidly, and she could see steam rising from the impossible lake as the water began to boil. "The ice," Sarah screamed. "It's melting the ice." Alina looked up and saw water beginning to cascade down the walls of the cavern. They had to get out, had to reach the surface before the entire fissure collapsed. But as she turned toward their climbing ropes, she saw that the way back was already blocked. More of the alien structures had emerged from the ice while they were distracted. They rose like crystalline serpents, their surfaces pulsing with that same hypnotic light. The humming had become a roar that filled the cavern, and Alina could feel it in her bones, in her blood, in the very fabric of her being. Alina, Chen's voice seemed to come from very far away. Alina, we have to move. But she couldn't move. She was transfixed by the structures, by the patterns of light that flowed across their surfaces like liquid poetry. They were trying to communicate, she realized, trying to tell her something that her human mind couldn't quite grasp. And then she understood, not in words but in pure concept, pure sensation. The structures weren't just alive, they were a manifestation of something far greater, something that existed in the spaces between atoms, in the quantum foam that underlay all of reality. They were the builders, the creators, the ones who had shaped the very laws of physics in this region of space. And they had been sleeping here, beneath Europa's ice, waiting for the universe to evolve to a point where they could emerge again. Alina, Sarah grabbed her arm, shaking her roughly. We have to go, the whole cavern is coming down. Alina blinked, the spell broken. The cavern was indeed collapsing. Great chunks of ice were falling from the ceiling, shattering on the floor below. The lake was roiling now, sending up clouds of steam that made it difficult to see. This way, Chen pointed toward a narrow passage that had opened in the cavern wall. It might lead to the surface. They ran, their magnetic boots clanging against the crystalline floor. Behind them, the alien structures continued their strange dance, their humming rising to a crescendo that made Alina's teeth ache. She could feel the pressure building again, stronger now, as if the entire moon was holding its breath. The passage was narrow and twisted, forcing them to move single file. Alina brought up the rear, glancing back every few seconds to make sure the structures weren't following. They seemed content to remain in their cavern, but she could see the light from their surfaces growing brighter, more intense. The energy readings are off the charts, Wright gasped as they stumbled into a wider chamber. Whatever that thing is, it's about to. He never finished the sentence. The world exploded into light and sound, and Alina was thrown off her feet by a shockwave that seemed to come from everywhere at once. She hit the wall hard, her head snapping back against her helmet with a crack that she felt rather than heard. When her vision cleared, she was lying on the floor of the chamber, her ears ringing. The others were scattered around her, all of them dazed but apparently alive. Chen was already struggling to his feet, his face pale behind his visor. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "The structures," Alina said, her voice hoarse. "They were trying to communicate, trying to tell us something." "I don't care if they were trying to sing us a lullaby," Chen snapped. "We're getting off this rock, and we're doing it now." They stumbled onward, following the passage as it twisted, and turned through Europa's frozen depths. Alina could feel the moon changing around them. The temperature was rising steadily, and she could hear the groan of shifting ice echoing through the tunnels. "The whole moon is destabilizing," Wright said, consulting his scanner with shaking hands. "Whatever we woke up down there, it's affecting the entire planetary body." "How long do we have?" Alina asked. "Hours, maybe less. The ice shell is beginning to fracture, if it collapses into the ocean below." He didn't need to finish. They all knew what would happen if Europa's ice shell destabilized. The entire moon would be transformed, and anyone still on the surface would be crushed by the resulting tidal waves. They emerged from the tunnels into a different landscape than the one they'd left. The surface was cracking, massive fissures opening and closing like the mouths of sleeping giants. Steam rose from the ice in dozens of places, and Alina could see liquid water pooling in the lower areas. The ascent vehicle, Sarah pointed to their landing craft, still sitting where they'd left it, but the ground around it was heaving and buckling, and Alina could see that the ice beneath it was beginning to fracture. "We have one chance," Chen said. "Everyone on board now." They ran across the unstable surface, their magnetic boots barely maintaining purchase on the heaving ice. Alina could feel the moon's rage, its ancient slumber disturbed by creatures too small and insignificant to comprehend what they had awakened. They reached the ascent vehicle just as the ice beneath it gave way. Chen shoved Alina through the airlock, then turned back to help Wright, who had stumbled. Sarah was already inside, frantically working the controls to start the engines. "Come on," she screamed, "we have to go." Alina turned back to see Chen dragging Wright across the ice. Behind them, the surface was collapsing into a massive sinkhole that seemed to be following them, racing to swallow them whole. Move, Alina shouted, reaching out to grab Wright's arm. Together, she and Chen hauled the engineer through the airlock as the vehicle began to tilt dangerously. Sarah hit the emergency ascent button, and the engines roared to life. The vehicle shuddered and bucked as it struggled to free itself from Europa's dying grip. Through the windows, Alina could see the surface giving way, revealing the dark waters of the hidden ocean below. And in those waters, something was moving, something vast and ancient and utterly alien. She caught just a glimpse of it, a shape that her mind couldn't quite process, a form that seemed to exist in more dimensions than her eyes could perceive, before the ascent vehicle broke free of Europa's gravity and shot toward the stars. They made it back to the Odyssey, but Alina knew that they were carrying something with them. Not physically, their instruments showed no contamination, no alien organisms clinging to their suits, but something had changed in each of them during those moments in the cavern. Chen had become withdrawn, spending hours alone in his quarters. Wright had filled notebook after notebook with equations that seemed to hurt the eyes when looked at directly. Sarah had developed a tremor in her hands and had stopped sleeping entirely. And Alina dreamed of the structures, of their strange, hypnotic beauty and the message they had tried to convey. She knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that Europa had been a seed, a sleeping egg waiting for the right moment to hatch. And now it was awake. They reported their findings to Mission Control, but the response was delayed. When it finally came, it was filled with questions they couldn't answer and orders they couldn't obey. Return to Europa, investigate further, document everything. But Alina knew they would never return. Whatever they had awakened on Europa was spreading. The energy readings from the moon had increased exponentially since their departure, and telescopic observations showed massive changes in the moon's surface. The ice was melting, the ocean was rising. Something was being born. As the Odyssey made its long journey back to Earth, Alina spent hours at the observation deck, watching Jupiter and its moons grow smaller in the distance. She knew that they had been changed by their encounter, that something fundamental had shifted in their understanding of the universe. They had found life, but it was nothing like what they had expected. It was vast and ancient and utterly indifferent to humanity's existence. It had slept beneath Europa's ice for eons, waiting for the universe to evolve to a point where it could emerge and claim its place in the cosmos. And they had awakened it. The final log entry Alina made before they entered cryosleep was brief and to the point. We were not the first intelligence in this solar system. We will not be the last. Europa was not a dead world, it was a womb, and something has been born from it that we cannot comprehend, cannot fight, and cannot escape. We have looked into the abyss, and the abyss has looked back. It saw us not as enemies or allies, but as irrelevant. We are insects buzzing around the feet of gods, and the gods are waking up. May whatever comes next have more wisdom than we did. As the Odyssey's crew slept their way home through the long darkness between worlds, Europa continued its transformation. The ice shell cracked and fell away, revealing the dark waters beneath. And in those waters, something vast and ancient stirred, preparing to spread its influence across the solar system. The age of humanity was ending. The age of the old ones was beginning. And there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Chapter 2: The Return. 6 months later, the Odyssey decelerated into Earth orbit with its crew still in cryosleep. The automated systems had functioned perfectly, maintaining the ship and its precious cargo through the long journey home. But something had changed during the voyage, something that the medical scanners detected immediately upon revival. Alina was the first to wake, her body aching with the familiar stiffness of cryosleep. The medical bay was dimly lit, its walls covered with displays showing her vital signs in real time. Dr. Kenji Nakamura, the ship's physician, was monitoring her revival from the control station. "Welcome back, Dr. Vasquez," he said, his voice professionally calm, but Alina could see the concern in his eyes. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," Alina groaned, sitting up slowly. "What's wrong?" Nakamura hesitated, which was unusual for him. In the 2 years she'd served with him, she'd never seen him struggle with words. "Your medical scans show some anomalies, all of you actually. Nothing life-threatening, but definitely unusual." Alina frowned. "What kind of anomalies?" "Neural activity patterns that we've never seen before. Enhanced electrical activity in certain regions of the brain. It's almost as if your exposure to whatever was on Europa has altered you somehow." The words sent a chill down Alina's spine. She remembered the humming, the patterns of light, the sense of something vast trying to communicate. Had they brought something back with them after all? I want to see the others, she said, swinging her legs over the side of the cryopod. They're still in revival, Nakamura cautioned. It will be several hours before they're fully conscious. But Alina was already moving, her medical gown flapping around her knees as she made her way to the other revival chambers. Chen was still unconscious, his face peaceful in a way it hadn't been since their encounter on Europa. Wright was stirring, his eyes moving rapidly beneath closed lids as if dreaming intensely. Sarah was already awake, staring at the ceiling with an expression that Alina couldn't quite read. Sarah, Alina approached her colleague carefully. How are you feeling? Sarah turned her head slowly, and Alina gasped. Her eyes had changed. They were still human eyes, still the same dark brown they'd always been, but there was something else there now. A depth that hadn't existed before, as if Sarah was looking at something far beyond the confines of the medical bay. I can see it, Sarah whispered. The pattern, the way everything connects. Alina, it's so beautiful and so terrible. What do you see? Alina asked, but Sarah just shook her head. Words aren't enough, you have to experience it to understand, but once you do, once you really see it, you can't unsee it. Alina backed away slowly, her heart racing. Whatever had happened to them on Europa, it was far from over. The changes were just beginning. Over the next few days, as the Odyssey was guided into docking with the orbital station, each crew member began to manifest their own unique symptoms. Chen became increasingly paranoid, convinced that something had followed them back from Europa. He spent hours reviewing sensor logs, searching for evidence of contamination that the ship's systems insisted didn't exist. Wright threw himself into his work with manic intensity, filling entire data pads with equations that made no sense to anyone else. He claimed he was trying to understand the physics of what they'd encountered, but his calculations seemed to lead nowhere, or perhaps everywhere at once. Sarah spent most of her time in the observation deck, staring out at the stars with her changed eyes. She said she could see patterns in the cosmic background radiation, messages written in the fundamental constants of the universe. And Alina dreamed, not normal dreams, but visions of vast cosmic structures that existed alongside human reality. She saw galaxies that were alive, stars that thought and felt, and something vast and ancient moving through the spaces between atoms. Mission Control was concerned, of course. They ordered immediate quarantine and extensive medical testing, but the tests revealed nothing conclusive: no foreign organisms, no radiation exposure, no chemical contamination. Whatever had changed the crew of the Odyssey was beyond the ability of human science to detect. We need to understand what happened to you, Dr. Patricia Hayes, the mission director, told them during a secure video conference. The Europa anomaly is spreading. We've detected similar energy signatures on Ganymede and Callisto. Whatever you encountered, it's not staying put. Alina exchanged glances with her crewmates. They had feared this would happen. The thing they had awakened on Europa wasn't content to remain in its frozen womb. It was spreading, reaching out to touch other worlds. We don't know what it is, Alina admitted, but it's not just spreading. It's evolving, adapting, and it's learning about us. Learning? Hayes leaned forward. What do you mean, learning? It's studying us, Sarah said, her voice distant and dreamy. Every time we observe it, it observes us back. We're not just discovering it, it's discovering us, and it's not impressed with what it found. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a curse. Humanity had made contact with something truly alien, and that something had found them wanting. We need to send another mission, Hayes said. A larger team, better equipped. We need to understand what we're dealing with before it reaches Earth. No, Chen said flatly. You can't send more people there, it's not safe. Commander, with all due respect, this isn't your decision to make. The safety of Earth takes priority over. You don't understand, Wright interrupted. It's not about safety, it's about survival. Every time we interact with it, we change it, and it changes us. It's like a virus, but one that operates on the fundamental level of reality itself. The room fell silent. Alina could see Hayes processing this information, trying to find a way to respond to the impossible. Are you saying, Hayes said slowly, that this thing is contagious, that it spreads through observation? Not contagious, Alina corrected. Transformative. It doesn't infect us in the traditional sense. It reveals things to us, shows us the universe as it really is, not as we imagine it to be. And once we've seen it, once we really understand, we can't go back to being what we were. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then we need to quarantine you, all of you, permanently. That won't help, Sarah said sadly. The transformation has already begun. In you, in everyone who's observed the data we sent back. Every piece of information, every image, every measurement, it all carries a piece of the pattern. You've all been exposed, whether you know it or not. The blood drained from Hayes' face. That's not possible. We've taken every precaution. The data was thoroughly analyzed for. For biological contamination, yes, Alina said gently. For chemical agents, for radiation, for anything that fits within our understanding of how the universe works. But this thing, it doesn't play by our rules. It makes new rules, and it doesn't care whether we understand them or not. The conference ended with promises of further discussion, but Alina knew that the decision had already been made. They would be quarantined, studied, perhaps even dissected in an attempt to understand what had happened to them. But it wouldn't matter. The transformation was already spreading. Over the following weeks, as the crew of the Odyssey underwent increasingly invasive testing, reports began to come in from across the solar system. The energy signatures detected on Europa were appearing on other moons, on asteroids, even in the upper atmospheres of the gas giants themselves. Something was waking up, something that had been dormant for eons, waiting for the universe to evolve to a point where it could emerge and claim its place in the cosmos. And humanity had been the trigger. Alina spent her time in quarantine writing, trying to document what she had experienced before the memories faded or changed. She knew that her perspective was no longer entirely human, that the things she had seen and felt were beyond the ability of normal minds to comprehend. But she had to try. It's not evil, she wrote in her journal. That's the most terrifying thing about it. It's not malevolent or hostile. It's simply so far beyond us that we can't even comprehend its motives. To it, we're not even insects. We're the chemical precursors to life, the building blocks that exist so that something greater can evolve. It doesn't hate us, it doesn't love us. It simply is. And in its being, it transforms everything it touches, not out of malice, but out of the simple fact of its existence. We thought we were alone in the universe. We were wrong. We were never alone. We were simply too small to see what was around us all along. The days passed, and the changes in the crew became more pronounced. Chen's paranoia evolved into something more like prescience. He seemed to know things before they happened, to sense dangers that existed on levels beyond normal perception. Wright's equations began to yield results, but they were results that challenged the very foundation of physics. He spoke of folded dimensions and quantum consciousness, of realities that existed parallel to their own and could be accessed through specific mathematical operations. Sarah's visions became more detailed, more specific. She described civilizations that had risen and fallen on worlds humanity had never touched, species that had encountered the same force they had found on Europa and had been transformed by it. And Alina began to fade, not physically, but existentially. She found herself existing in multiple places at once, experiencing time in ways that made no logical sense. She would have conversations with people who weren't there, visit places that existed only in her transformed consciousness. We're becoming something else, she told the others during one of their rare moments of lucidity. Not human, but not inhuman either. Something new, something that can perceive the universe as it really is. Is that such a bad thing? Sarah asked. The universe is so much larger than we ever imagined, so much more complex, more beautiful. Why should we cling to our limited human perceptions when we can see the truth? Because the truth might kill us, Chen said grimly. Every day more people are exposed to the pattern. Every observation, every measurement, every attempt to understand what's happening, it all spreads the transformation. How long before everyone on Earth is changed? Would that be so terrible? Wright asked. If everyone could see what we see, understand what we understand. Yes, Alina said quietly, because we don't understand, not really. We're like children trying to comprehend advanced mathematics. We see the symbols, we recognize the patterns, but we don't grasp the meaning, and the meaning is everything. The debate continued, but Alina knew it was academic. The transformation was already spreading beyond their control. Every day, more people reported strange dreams, unusual perceptions, a sense of something vast and alien moving in the depths of reality. The old world was ending, the new world was beginning. And there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Chapter 3: The Transformation. 3 months after their return to Earth, Alina stood in the observation dome of the research facility that had become their home. The quarantine had been lifted, not because they were no longer considered a risk, but because the risk had spread too far to be contained. The transformation was everywhere now, not just in the scientists who had studied the data from Europa, but in the general population. People were changing, evolving, becoming something that was still recognizably human, but was also something more. Or perhaps something less. It's beautiful in a way, Sarah said, joining her at the window. Below them, the city sprawled in its usual chaotic patterns, but Alina could see the changes. Buildings that seemed to shift and flow like liquid, streets that curved in ways that defied Euclidean geometry, people who moved through spaces that shouldn't exist. Is it, Alina asked, or are we just so far gone that we can't remember what beauty used to mean? Sarah smiled, but it was the same sad expression she'd worn since Europa. Beauty is just a pattern that pleases the mind. We've seen larger patterns now, more complex ones. Of course, the old beauty seems pale in comparison. Alina turned away from the window. But at what cost? We're losing ourselves, losing our humanity. Were we ever really human? Sarah asked. Or were we just pretending, playing at being important while the real universe passed us by? The question hung in the air between them. Alina had been asking herself the same thing ever since the transformation had begun. What did it mean to be human in a universe that was so much larger and stranger than they had ever imagined? Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Hayes' voice came over the intercom. We need you in the main lab. There's been a development. Alina and Sarah exchanged glances before heading to the laboratory. They had become celebrities of a sort, the first humans to encounter truly alien intelligence, the harbingers of a new age of human evolution. But the fame came with a price. They were studied, monitored, tested. Their every word was analyzed for hidden meaning, their every action scrutinized for signs of further transformation. The main laboratory was filled with equipment designed to detect and measure the changes they were undergoing. Dr. Hayes stood before a holographic display showing energy patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living things. We've been monitoring the energy signatures from Europa, she explained. They're spreading faster than our models predicted. At this rate, the entire solar system will be affected within a year. Affected how? Alina asked, though she already knew the answer. Transformed, changed. The fundamental constants of physics are shifting. Reality is becoming more flexible, more responsive to consciousness. Alina nodded. She had felt the changes herself. The way her thoughts could influence her surroundings, the way the universe seemed to bend slightly to accommodate her will. It was subtle, but it was real. And the people? Sarah asked. That's why I called you here, Hayes said. We've identified a pattern in the transformations. They're not random. They're following a specific sequence, as if we're all being guided toward a particular state of being. She gestured to the display, and Alina could see it now, a pattern that repeated across thousands of cases, a progression that seemed to have a specific endpoint. What kind of endpoint? Alina asked. Hayes hesitated. We're not sure. But the transformations seem to be converging on a particular neural configuration. It's as if we're all being prepared for something. Prepared for what? Sarah asked. Contact, Alina said quietly. Real contact. Not just observation, but communication. The structures on Europa weren't just showing us the universe. They were teaching us how to see. Hayes looked at her with surprise. You think this is intentional, that the changes we're experiencing are part of some larger plan? I think we've been students in a cosmic classroom, Alina said, and we're about to graduate. The implications of that statement were staggering. If Alina was right, then the transformation of humanity wasn't an accident or a side effect, it was the goal. The intelligence they had encountered on Europa had been waiting for them, preparing them for something far larger than they could imagine. But why us? Hayes asked. Why now? Because we're ready, Sarah said. We've reached a point in our evolution where we can begin to comprehend the larger universe. We're like children who have finally learned to read, discovering that there are libraries full of books we never knew existed. Alina nodded, but she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. The question is, what happens when we finish reading, when we understand everything there is to understand? We become like them, Sarah said simply, citizens of the cosmos rather than prisoners of one small world. Or we cease to exist entirely, Alina countered. What if the transformation isn't about becoming more than human? What if it's about becoming something else entirely? The debate continued, but Alina knew that it was ultimately meaningless. The transformation was happening, regardless of what they wanted or feared. The only choice they had was how to face it. Over the following weeks, the changes accelerated. The energy signatures from Europa grew stronger, spreading throughout the solar system like ripples in a pond. On Earth, more and more people began to experience the transformation. their perceptions expanding to encompass the larger reality that had always existed around them. Some embraced the change, welcoming the expanded consciousness and enhanced perception. Others fought against it, clinging to their limited human perspective even as the universe revealed its true nature around them. Elena found herself somewhere in between. She could feel the pull of the transformation, the seductive promise of understanding that lay just beyond her grasp, but she also felt a deep sense of loss, a mourning for the simple, limited world she had once inhabited. "It's not about losing humanity," Sarah told her one day as they walked through the transformed city. "It's about transcending it, becoming something more." "But what if I liked what I was?" Elena asked. "What if I don't want to transcend?" Sarah smiled sadly. "The universe doesn't ask our permission, Elena. It simply is. We can either accept it or be destroyed by it." As they walked, Elena noticed something strange. The people around them seemed to be moving in patterns, their actions coordinated in ways that shouldn't have been possible. It was as if they were all part of a larger organism, individual cells working together towards some unknown purpose. "Do you see it?" Sarah asked. "The pattern. We're becoming something larger than ourselves, a collective consciousness that spans the planet." "And then?" Elena asked. "And then we reach out to the stars, to the other intelligences that are waiting for us, the ones that have been waiting for billions of years." Elena shivered, but not from cold. She could feel it now, the vast intelligence that lay beyond the veil of human perception. It was patient and ancient and utterly alien, but it was also welcoming in a way she hadn't expected. They were not the first species to undergo this transformation. They would not be the last, but they were special in their own way, unique in their perspective and their understanding. "It's time," Sarah said suddenly. "Can you feel it? The final phase is beginning." Elena could feel it, a gathering of energy, a focusing of consciousness that spanned the globe. Every transformed human was contributing to it, adding their unique perspective to the collective whole. "What's happening?" she asked. "We're making contact," Sarah said. "Real contact, not just passive observation, but active communication with the intelligence that has been guiding us." Elena felt a sudden pressure in her mind, as if something vast and incomprehensible was trying to fit itself into her limited consciousness. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was overwhelming, a sensation of something ancient and powerful and utterly alien trying to communicate. And then she understood. The intelligence they had encountered on Europa was not alone. It was part of a vast network of beings that spanned the galaxy, creatures that existed in the spaces between atoms, in the quantum foam that underlay all of reality. They had been waiting for humanity to reach a certain point in their evolution, a point where they could begin to comprehend the larger universe. But comprehension came with a price. "We have to choose," Elena said, understanding flooding through her. "We can either remain as we are, limited and human, or we can join them, but we can't do both." "It's not really a choice," Sarah said. "Not anymore. The transformation has gone too far. We're already part of them, whether we want to be or not." Elena felt the truth of that statement. She could feel the pull of the collective consciousness, the seductive promise of understanding and belonging that lay just beyond her grasp. But she also felt a deep sense of loss, a mourning for the individual self she had once been. "What happens to us?" she asked, "to who we were?" "We become part of something larger," Sarah said. "Our memories, our experiences, our unique perspective, it all becomes part of the collective. We don't cease to exist exactly. We just expand, become more than we were." Elena could feel the transformation reaching its climax. The energy that had been building was reaching a crescendo, a point of no return that would transform not just humanity, but the entire solar system. "It's beautiful," she whispered, finally seeing the pattern that Sarah had described, the way everything connects, the way everything fits together. "Yes," Sarah agreed, "and it's only the beginning. There are layers upon layers of reality, dimensions of existence that we can't even imagine yet. This is just the first step in a journey that will take us to the very edge of existence." The transformation reached its peak, and Elena felt herself expanding beyond the confines of her physical body. She could see the universe as it really was, not the limited, three-dimensional reality she had once inhabited, but the true cosmos in all its infinite complexity and beauty. And she was not alone. All around her, she could sense the others, the transformed humans who had made the same journey, who had seen the same visions and understood the same truths. They were part of something larger now, a collective consciousness that spanned the planet and reached out toward the stars. But even as she embraced the transformation, Elena felt a pang of loss. The simple, limited world she had once inhabited was gone forever, replaced by something vast and complex and utterly alien. She had gained understanding, but she had lost innocence. "Goodbye," she whispered to the person she had once been. "Thank you for the journey." And then she was gone, absorbed into the collective consciousness that was humanity's future. The transformation was complete, the contact had been made, and the universe would never be the same again. Epilogue: The New Cosmos. 1 year after the Odyssey's return from Europa, the solar system was unrecognizable. The energy signatures that had first appeared on Europa had spread throughout the system, transforming not just the people but the very fabric of reality itself. On Earth, the old cities had been replaced by structures that seemed to grow from the ground like crystalline trees. The people who inhabited them were no longer entirely human. They were something more, a fusion of human consciousness and cosmic awareness that transcended the limitations of physical existence. The transformed humans had learned to manipulate reality at a fundamental level, bending the laws of physics to their will. They could travel between worlds in the blink of an eye, communicate across vast distances instantaneously, and exist in multiple places at once. But the transformation was not without its costs. Many had been unable to handle the expanded consciousness, their minds shattering under the weight of cosmic awareness. Others had simply faded away, their individual selves absorbed into the collective consciousness that now spanned the planet. Those who survived had become something new, not quite human, not quite alien, but something in between. They retained their human memories and emotions, but they also had access to the vast knowledge and understanding of the cosmic intelligence they had joined. Elena, or what had once been Elena, stood at the edge of the solar system, watching as the transformation spread outward. She could feel the minds of her fellow humans, all of them connected in a vast network of thought and emotion that spanned the void. But she could also feel something else, the presence of other intelligences, other species that had undergone similar transformations. They were out there, waiting in the spaces between stars, ready to welcome humanity into the cosmic community. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with loss and transformation, but it had also been filled with wonder and discovery, with the joy of understanding and the beauty of cosmic truth. As she prepared to make the final leap, to join the larger consciousness that awaited her among the stars, Elena thought about the person she had once been, the scientist who had sought knowledge, the explorer who had ventured into the unknown, the human who had faced the cosmic void with courage and determination. That person was gone now, transformed into something larger and more complex. But she was also still there, still Elena Vasquez, still the same person who had looked out at the stars and wondered what secrets they held. "Thank you," she whispered to the universe. "Thank you for showing me the truth." And then she was gone, absorbed into the cosmic consciousness that was humanity's destiny. The solar system was quiet once more, transformed but peaceful, ready to welcome the next species that would make the journey from limited existence to cosmic awareness. The universe was vast and ancient and filled with wonders beyond imagination, and humanity had finally taken its place among the stars. But even as the transformed humans spread out across the galaxy, they never forgot their origins. They carried with them the memory of Earth, of the simple life they had once lived, of the courage it had taken to face the unknown and embrace the transformation. And they never forgot the lesson they had learned on Europa, that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined, and that sometimes the greatest discoveries came with the greatest costs. The age of cosmic humanity had begun, and the universe would never be the same again. The end.